Hello everybody, Andy here from Glass Half Dead, the #1 kill team channel on YouTube, unless of course you are aware of any other kill team channel on YouTube, in which case, let's not talk about it, thank you. Okay, so today we have an update. We have an FAQ errata, a balance pass, one could call it, on kill team. This came out a little bit of nowhere, to be honest, but it shouldn't have. But this also proves that the last FAQ errata was very much an emergency one, came out of nowhere, but also came out late. And they must have been having some back-end software issues to make us wait for that long till after LVO. Now we're back on track. We're getting our errata the same day as 40k. Great to see that. Excellent. Okay, with that said, a very quick administrative note for how you get this. Go to your app, update the app, okay, in your Google Play or your App Store, whatever it's called. Okay, you update the app itself. You then have to go through every single faction and the core rules and click update. Okay, nice. Now for this particular errata thingy, every single faction has been updated. Okay, this video is only going to be covering the core rules in FAQ, a little bit of an explanation. I am not then going to be talking about the individual teams. There have been some nerfs, there have been some buffs. For example, Void Dance has a slight nerf. Pathfinders, nothing. They have been touched. Sorry, they had a very, very minor accidental buff. But a lot of these things are like, they've actually updated the wording in how Medic works. So any faction with Medic might have just had an update. Additional administrative note. The way they have chosen to reference whether or not you currently have a new update in your team is the app doesn't have a version number that we care about. We have 1.0, 1.1, 1.2. Each team has its own version. So for example, Blades of Cain might be on version 1.1. The core book rules might be on 1.2, and whatever, Blooded might be on 1.0. That's great. However, the way we now know whether or not their thing is not new, but the latest version, is if you go to their thing, it will say update 1.1. And then to get to updates 1.0, it will say previous erratas. Cool. Doesn't quite fix my personal issue as a creator trying to figure out what's new, because it doesn't say this is new with this patch, but it will stop me at least from reading old versions. Great. Love to see it. So let's crack on, shall we? Let's not dilly-dally. Let's get straight into the updated rules. Here we go. I'm Tiny, and these are the erratas. Okay, so key principles damage. The reason... Oh, sorry, did I say it already? Yeah, this video is only the FAQ errata because I'm on holiday and I don't want to go through all of the teams today. It's too much work. There you go. Normally I do it all in one. Let's go. Right, let's start with key principles distances because they've added a single 3 words. It used to be if an operative is carrying a marker, now they've specified a mission or objective marker. I don't know what this changes. I assume that perhaps some new teams are going to drop markers which are neither mission or objective markers. There you go. Cool. Not the case. At the moment, as far as I'm aware, they've specified. Nice. Key principles damage. So some rules allow an incapacitated operative to perform a free action before being removed from the kill zone. Yeah, cool. This might be something that is on their datasheet. For example, I know a lot of models can hit on death sort of thing. There's also, for example, the Brood Brothers, I know, who can, you know, their cult icon dude. If you're killed within 6 of him, he can make you do a thing, perform 1 free action before you die. Such an operative cannot perform more than 1 free action, excluding place marker, in this instance, and that operative's player decides the order of any of its rules that occur before it's removed from the kill zone, taking precedence over the player with initiative deciding. Just totally off the top of my head, I can imagine that what this is going to do is there are compound actions in Kill Team, and I think this stops them. For example, Daka Boy is the classic example. You can use his Daka Dash, which would allow you to dash and shoot. Now, I think it's pretty indubitable that you cannot do that at this point because you would be doing 2 free actions to do that. except you're doing it within a compound action which allows you to perform two actions. I think this pretty clearly says, no, you can't do that. Cool. This presumably is future-proofing. There might be something that already exists where this is a big deal. I am not aware of it, but there you go. Right, we then get actions, shoot, select valid target. And I think this is a big one we obviously need to pay attention to. We all knew this was broken AF, but they've updated it. So, an operative cannot be in cover from and obscured by the same terrain feature. If it would be, the defender must select one of them, cover or obscured, for that sequence when their operative is selected as the valid target. To very quickly kind of let me tell you this. Let me give you the math. It is unless the enemy has ignore obscuring, obscuring is always better than cover. There you go. Done. The only time you would now pick obscuring is if you're getting the cover and the obscuring from different pieces of terrain. So if you're thinking about a nice big piece of Volcus terrain, you're stood on one side, okay? Don't forget that is all one big building. So if they're drawing their line of sight from here, you would still get obscuring from this wall, and then you would now not be able to get cover from this wall. Well, sorry, you could. You could take either, right? But you'd take obscuring. So remember that it might be a different wall, but it's the same piece of terrain. There you go. Cool, that's a nice update. They had to update this. Every tournament and pretty much every player has agreed that, yep, this is done. We should update it. And they have, and that's good. I'm glad to hear it. Glad to see it. There is more coming, but let's go for it. So, there's another big one. I assume it's going to come up, but it's to do with how you score objectives on Gallo Dark. I'll talk about that if it doesn't come up, but I think it should, hopefully. Let's talk about the rules commentary. Can you explain further what it means when a rule states that an operative is in cover and obscured if another target was? Okay, interesting that this is a question. I haven't read these yet. This is a live read. When determining cover and obscured for that operative, whatever was determined for the primary or original target is the same. For example, in the case of blast, secondary targets are not in cover / obscured if the primary target was not, and they are if the primary target was. So the thing with the FAQ erratas is that is exactly how that works, and so I question, why did it come up? What was being up, like, were people misunderstanding that? That is just how Blast works. It's good that they're doubling down. Love to see it. Cool. Do rules that prevent an operative from being selected as a valid target, e.g. Harkenjäger in position, prevent that operative from being a secondary target for a weapon with the Blast X weapon rule? No, as secondary targets from Blast are not selected. Good to see. It's a bit of an interesting one when it comes to this sort of thing. So this is very much a case of them just confirming, with our rules, do what the rule says, not what the rule doesn't say. So it's nice that they're confirming it, but yes, you might think, like, they have said it very clearly here, it's just, they are not selected. It's like, oh, but if something isn't selected, how can you shoot it? Because the way they are using the English language is in a very, very specific technical way, right? It's like, what do you mean I don't select the model? Like, well, in colloquial English, you could say you select something and it means a certain thing. And they're like, no, you don't select it. What? They're using a technical language that they have created for their own rulebook. There you go. When counteracting, if a rule has increased or decreased the cost of an action, does this affect what actions an operative can perform? For example, can the Angel of Death mobile chapter tactic allow an operative to perform the fallback action while counteracting? Now it's 1 AP. Yes, this is a really good FAQ. Again, I would have assumed this was the case, but it's really nice that they've clarified that, because that is definitely something that might be an issue for debate, I think. So it's really good to see. Generally, when it comes to GW, sometimes they will errata something so that it now does not what you expect. Sometimes, like, genuinely, I never know with questionable things whether they will go raw or rye. In general, if they're doing an FAQ like these, this is them saying, yes, we meant what we said. If they errata it and change what it originally said, that means, oops, we messed up. We are changing what it meant. So If a rule allows an operative to move any remaining move distance from a previous action, this comes up quite a lot, and its move set is modified between those actions, e.g. as a result of becoming injured, is the remaining move distance modified? No. Cool, that's good to see. Interesting. I suppose they're kind of saying that as soon as you do an action, do a thing, you lock in your stat line at that time, at that moment. And then whatever happens after that moment of locking in your decision doesn't matter. You're still doing things from that, that keyframe, if you will. What should I go? I'll go right. I'll go back and forwards. When retaining dice, if a rule retains a fail as a success instead, or a success as a critical success, does it change the numerical result of the dice? No. Good. This is the thing. So this comes up a lot. Colloquially, we will often say the word 6 instead of a crit. That isn't exactly correct. You don't need... A 6 is always a crit. However, you don't need a 6 to make it a crit. But then when we're trying to kind of mentally remember our dice pools and what we've got, what you will often see is people, if they've got lethal 5, they will swap their roll of a 5 to a 6 so that they know it's a crit. But that's not actually what's happening. You can get a crit and not get a 6, and you can get a 6 and not get a crit, but there you go. Can operatives that can only perform a restricted set of actions perform actions that are treated as one of those actions, e.g. hatchway fight? Yes. If that operative is permitted to perform the action it's treated as. Okay, so I really like that. One of the big things with GW writing in general is defining treated as. So this comes up very often across all of their game systems because they rarely define it. The reason they will use the phrase treated as is because they have a whole set of rules and systems that define how that action works when it is allowed to be used. And so in their heads, what they're saying is, we are saying here, treat this as if it happens in the movement phase. For example, in 40k, you'll see that a lot. Because technically, there is no system of rules to allow you to move in the fight phase. Doesn't exist. So they're saying, move as if it's the movement phase. Because then they have all of the rules that govern movement in the movement phase. But of course, it does mean, well, am I actually in the movement phase? To which they say, oh no, not at all. Why would you assume that? It's very clunky, very awkward. We get it, but it's really terrible to sign like rules design decisions from them there. But here we're saying that yes, treated as, we could have just written is, right? Good to see it. I think it is a little bit different for Kill Team because Kill Team doesn't have to have that phased rules restrictions, but you do see it pop up kind of in the same DNA there with Kill Team. They're always saying perform a free action because there's this whole governing rule set about how you can perform an action. It's a whole thing. There you go. Anyway, this is just confirming it. Nice. If I attempt to resolve a rule that allows a friendly operative to perform an action upon incapacitation, but that action cannot be completed, have I used any limited number of uses for that rule? Yes. Oh, interesting. Okay, cool. You get one shot, one opportunity. Well, you know where I'm going with this one. Cool. Right. Have I read that one? Yes. Can something be wholly within a territory while also being on the centre line? Yes, but it wouldn't be within the other territory. Wait, what? Wait. Huh. Huh. Right. That's... okay. Be wholly within a territory while also being on the centre line. Okay. Okay. I would not have guessed that. I would not have guessed that. I can't lie. That's an interesting ruling. Again, I don't care which way they ever rule something, but to rule it one way or the other, they've kind of made... they put a sand in their line. A sand in their line? Sure. Line in their sand. And they said, this is what we've decided. I would not have seen that one coming. Okay. Fine. Good to know. Good to know. This is going to come up often when you're talking about scoring objectives. I would have often said that if you are... If you're wholly within a territory, you're not on the center line. But they've said you are. So cool. Love to see it. When resolving rules that relate to an operative being activated, what order should these be resolved in? Resolve rules that specify when an operative would be activated first. Oh, I've gone too far, sorry. Resolve rules that specify when an operative would be activated first, then resolve rules that specify when an operative is activated, starting with rules that inflict damage, e.g. Plague Wounds, Poison. Cool, so we do indeed get quite a few simultaneously occurring actions in Kill Team, and the Kill Team rule set doesn't have a brilliant way to delineate an actual order of operations. I think that when you come up against these sorts of things, if there isn't a specific FAQ, I would generally, maybe this is in the rules and this is the actual correct way of doing it, but whoever has initiative decides. If you think things are happening at the same time, whoever has initiative gets to say what happens first. Or, sorry, whoever's the active player, right? They get to say, this is the first thing that is occurring in our stack. That's a technical term. In our stack of activations or order of operations, and I want this to happen first. I think that's generally what they imagine happens, but it is good when possible to break things out and say, this is how it works for this specific scenario. Can rules that ignore or reduce damage inflicted by an attack dice ignore or reduce additional damage inflicted by that attack dice? Yes. Yes, why wouldn't it be able to? Cool. Hold on, let me think about it. Can rules that ignore just a scratch ignore or reduce additional damage inflicted by that attack dice? Vicious Venom. Okay, hold on. So I've got to read this because if Vicious Venom is what I think it is, I'm actually really surprised by this rolling. So I'm going to have to stop the read. I know that it was going so swimmingly so far. But let me read what Vicious Venom is. Use this firefight point when a friendly Stingwing operative, excluding Oversight Drone, is fighting and strikes with a critical success. Inflict D3 additional damage. Ah, okay. That's... So, perhaps this is my fault for thinking of things in terms of the previous edition. But normally, so before, okay, so we used to work with something called mortal damage, which is something that can't be ignored. And often, if you had additional damage, it would come in the form of mortal damage. So things that just can't be ignored, right? So here, let's think it through. I ignore or reduce damage inflicted by an attack dice, and this is additional damage. Huh. So if you just a scratch, what is it? When a friendly Vested operative, excluding Oversight, is fighting. So if I charge in with my Vespid and I go for a hit, a strike, and I get a crit, I can use Vicious Venom when I see I've rolled that crit to inflict D3 additional damage. At that point, just a scratch will ignore not only my critical damage, but also my additional D3 damage. Interesting. Interesting. Okay. Okay. That's... Alright, I'm having to check one other thing. Sorry. I have to check it. I know this is such a smooth read. But if we look at the commandos just a scratch. Use this firefight when attack dice inflicts normal damage on a friendly operative. But you see, just again, I haven't sat down and really thought about this, but just as scratch cannot be used to ignore critical damage. Could I use it to ignore the D3 damage additionally applied? I would say yes, just off my initial assumption, because that isn't critical damage. Whatever, who knows? Don't care. Not gonna. That would be a very poor reason to do it. But I guess my question is, if I do 3 damage with that additional damage there from the Vespid Vicious Venom, if that goes to 3, that means that kicks in because most damage reduction abilities are it can reduce damage of 3 or less. So if I do the full 3 damage, it goes down to 2. If I only roll a 1 or 2, that can't be reduced anyway, unless you have something that just reduces all damage, obviously, but those are very rare. So if I hit you with a 3 damage normal hit, and then 3 damage from my Vicious Venom, Are you knocking off 2? And so you're doing 4 damage, or are you doing 5 damage? Who knows? These are questions for people that care, not me. Thank you. All right, moving on. We're resolving rules that relate to an operative being activated. We've already read that one. We've already read that one. All good, all good. Have we? Yes. When resolving rules that relate to an operative being incapacitated, what order should these be resolved in? Have I not just read this? No. Okay. Resolve rules that specify when an operative would be incapacitated first. Then resolve rules. I swear I've read this. No. It just starts exactly the same as the previous one. Okay. Love it. Resolve rules that specify when an operative would be incapacitated first. Then resolve rules that specify when an operative is incapacitated. Cool. I like it. Basically, if it says would, that happens first. If it says is, that happens second. This does make sense. It is logical. I do understand what they're saying. Cool. This is followed by rules that specify before an operative is removed from the kill zone. Note that in the case of the medic rule and similar, this rule would resolve first, but would then prevent any relevant is and before rules being resolved, if any, as the operative would no longer be incapacitated. And now that we've read this, this makes perfect sense as to why every medic rule has been updated, presumably to make sure it sits in line with this. I like to see it. Basically, clearly, what the rules designers have now seen 3.5 years into the rule set, they've realised that they need an order of operations and a stack. So that's lovely. Right, we do have a minor issue in that somehow, from all of this, one of the things I wanted to talk about hasn't been addressed. So I'm going to have to go and look at that and tell you what it is. So I don't know where this turns up. Oh, it's in the approved ops. So in the approved ops card pack, I want to throw this out there as well. Okay. It is update 1.2, approved ops card pack 2024. Plant beacons, recon TACOP mission action. So this is referring to the plant beacons mission action, as we all know. So add additional text to end of third bullet point. More than 6 inches from your other beacon mission markers in a kill zone that uses the close quarters rules, e.g. kill zone Gallowdark, ignore wall terrain when measuring the distance. So what was possible to do is on Killzone Gallowdark, you're in there, you're doing your thing, you drop a beacon, one side of a door, you close the door, and you drop a beacon on the other side of the door. Not with the same operative, to clarify, you can't do that, but with different operatives. Because the rule here is all about you can never, ever, ever measure through Gallowdark walls for any reason. There are now a whole load of things that ignore that rule, so there you go. And now planting beacons, measuring that is now one of those things. This is really good. I'm going to be helping TO a tournament at the South Coast. I don't know what it's called. South Coast GT, maybe? It's one of the UK ITC things on the 22nd of March, maybe? This month. And I'm helping TO because Buddy needed help, so I'm going to jump in for him. And this is actually one of the homebrew erratas that he did for this tournament. It's quite amusing. He just posted this errata, like his own personal tournament FAQ for people. And he just got a little bit of kickback from some of the players saying, hey man, this is just homebrew. Homebrew, you're just making stuff up. And then about an hour later, this dropped, and that's quite amusing. So that, yeah, there you go. Quite amusing. So we all knew it was an issue. It definitely brings up an interesting question of, should we be trying to change the rules? I say yes, if I'm honest. Yeah, I think a lot of players and people know what the issues with the game are, and we shouldn't be beholden to a 3-month cycle of GW who don't always have total oversight of every issue within the game. So TOs out there, make changes. Like, legit. A lot of stuff that was changed for LVO was changed by the LVO crew because they knew it was a problem. Now, they haven't all been updated and brought into kill team rules, but most of them have, because everybody knows it's a problem. You don't have to wait for GW to go through a whole like playtesting and balance change and translation cycle and software patching cycle for you to know that some stuff's just broken, okay? TOs out there, look, you can run a strict raw tournament if you want, and in general you should, but just be aware that as soon as you make a ruling, Mr. TO or Mrs. TO, you've homebrewed. Cool. So homebrew early, homebrew often, okay? As soon as you make a ruling that isn't 100% raw and clear in the pack, you've decided it's a homebrew event. So just homebrew, right? Put out your FAQ erratas for your particular tournament early as you can so people know what they're coming into, and just be aware, if you didn't do it there before, you would have had to have done it on the day, and that is much worse. Cool. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. I might find time to go over the team stuff, but for now, that's been quite a lot. There you go. So thanks to G-Dubs for putting this out. In the past, I've said that the second patch is going to be, which is this one, is what GW wants Kill Team to be. This here should be what GW wants Kill Team to be. They had their first launch, they had their emergency patch, and now they've had their first real proper patch. What do you think? Obviously not just based on the core rules, but based on, you know, all the tournament team changes as well, most of which were just updates on how Medic works, by the way. But yeah, let me know. Do you think this is the final version, or is there still going to be a few issues?